Imagine waking up tomorrow and hearing this on the news. The government has created trillions of new rupees, dollars, euros. No explosions, no alarms, no trucks dumping cash from the sky. Your bank app still shows the same balance. Your salary hasn't changed, but something fundamental just shifted. Because money was just created, and most of it will never reach you. So the uncomfortable question is not, can governments print money? It's this: who actually gets it first, and who quietly pays for it later? That question matters right now more than almost any other economic question on Earth. Because in the last few years, governments didn't just print money, they printed a lot of it. More than at almost any point in modern history. And yet, most people don't feel richer, they feel squeezed. So where did the money go? Let's slow this down. No jargon, no textbooks, just the system as it actually works. Picture money printing the way most people imagine it.
A government needs cash. They turn on a machine. New money enters the economy. Everyone has more to spend. Problem solved. That story feels intuitive. It's also mostly wrong. Because modern money doesn't enter society evenly. It enters through very specific doors. And those doors belong to very specific people. To understand who gets the money, we have to start with how money is actually created today. Governments don't usually print money directly and hand it out. What they do instead is borrow. They issue government bonds. A bond is basically an IOU. I need money today, I'll pay you back later with interest. So who buys these IOUs? Banks, pension funds, insurance companies, investment funds, and most importantly, central banks. This is where the real story begins. When a central bank decides to print money, it doesn't run a printing press in secret. It opens a computer, and with a few keystrokes, it creates digital money. That money didn't exist a second ago. Now it does. And it uses that money to buy government bonds and other financial assets. So the very first recipients of newly created money are not citizens. They are institutions, large ones. Banks sell bonds to the central bank. Financial markets sell assets. Balance sheets expand. Fresh money enters the system at the top. This is not accidental. It's by design. Because the system assumes something. If you stabilize banks and markets first, the benefits will trickle down to the rest of the economy. More lending, more investment, more jobs, higher wages. That's the theory. But reality is messier. Let's follow the money step by step. Step 1, new money is created digitally. Step 2, it flows into banks and financial markets. Step 3, asset prices respond. Stocks rise, bonds rise, real estate rises. Anything scarce and investable starts getting more expensive. This happens fast, sometimes in days, sometimes in hours. Meanwhile, wages move slowly, very slowly.
So while asset owners see their wealth increase almost immediately, everyone else waits, and often never catches up. This phenomenon has a name, though most people have never heard it. It's called the Cantillon Effect, a simple idea with uncomfortable implications. Whoever receives new money first gets to spend it before prices rise. Whoever receives it last pays higher prices without getting the benefit. Early receivers win, late receivers lose, Not because of hard work, not because of intelligence, but because of position in the system. Banks get the money before inflation shows up. Markets get it before groceries get expensive. Asset holders adjust before renters do. By the time the money reaches everyday goods and services, the purchasing power has already changed. So when people ask, why does everything feel more expensive even though I didn't get richer? This is part of the answer. Let's put numbers on this. After the global financial crisis, and again after the pandemic, central banks expanded their balance sheets by trillions. In some countries, the money supply grew faster in 2 years than it had in the previous decade. At the same time, stock markets reached record highs. Property prices surged. Luxury asset prices exploded. But median wages barely moved. That gap is not random, it's structural. And here's the irony. The policy is often sold as helping the economy. But the economy is not one thing. It's a collection of people in very different positions. If you own assets, new money feels like relief. If you rely on wages, it feels like erosion. Now let's address the uncomfortable question most people instinctively ask next. If governments can create money so easily, why not just give it directly to people? Sometimes they do. Stimulus checks, direct transfers, emergency payments. But even then, the timing matters. When money goes directly to households, it often arrives after asset prices have already adjusted. And even direct payments usually come with limits, temporary, conditional, politically constrained. Meanwhile, financial support to markets tends to be fast, massive, and open-ended.
Because the system is terrified of collapse at the top. A failing bank can crash the entire system. A struggling household, sadly, usually cannot. That's not a moral judgment, it's a structural reality of how modern finance is wired. Now zoom out for a moment. Ask a bigger question. Why does the system work this way at all? Because modern economies are built on debt. Governments borrow to function. Businesses borrow to grow. Consumers borrow to survive. And debt only works if the system remains liquid, if money keeps flowing. So when crises hit, central banks act as firefighters. They flood the system with money to prevent collapse. But firefighting water damages some rooms while saving the building. And the rooms that flood first are not random. They are the ones closest to the pipes. There's another quiet consequence here that rarely gets discussed. Power. When money is created through financial markets, it strengthens those markets. It increases their influence over policy, politics, and priorities. Governments become dependent on stable markets. Markets become dependent on central banks. An invisible loop forms. And ordinary citizens are mostly spectators. Not because anyone sat in a room and designed it to be unfair, but because systems tend to evolve in ways that protect themselves. Now let's contrast the story we're told with the reality we live. The story says printing money helps everyone. The reality says it helps different people at different times in very different ways. The story says inflation is a mystery caused by global events. The reality says inflation is often the delayed echo of money creation. The story says markets reflect the economy. The reality says markets often react to money before the economy does. And this creates a strange psychological effect. People are told the economy is doing great, markets are up, numbers look strong, but their personal experience feels worse. Rent is higher, food costs more, savings feel smaller. That disconnect breeds confusion, then anger, then distrust. And history shows us where that can lead. Here's the part that makes many people uncomfortable. There is no neutral way to create money. Every method benefits someone first. Every method has winners and losers. The question is not whether money printing is good or bad. The question is whether we're honest about who benefits. Because pretending it's neutral hides real trade-offs, and hidden trade-offs eventually surface as social tension. Now let's end with a thought that doesn't have a clean answer. Central banks argue they prevent worse outcomes. Without intervention, crashes would be deeper, unemployment higher, pain sharper. That may be true, but it also raises a harder question. If the system requires constant money creation to survive, if asset prices depend on it, if inequality widens every time it happens, what happens when printing money is no longer enough, or when trust in the system starts to crack? Because money, at its core, is trust. Trust that it will hold value. Trust that the rules are fair enough. Trust that tomorrow won't quietly punish you for yesterday's stability. So the next time you hear that governments are printing money, don't imagine cash raining down on society. Imagine a river, and ask yourself one simple question. Where does the river start? And by the time it reaches you, how much has already been taken out?